Good evening. It's Sunday, the 19th of July, and you're listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast, where we cover matters of national, international, and sometimes local importance in a calm, measured, and decent way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Good evening, Ian. Good evening, listeners and viewers. Welcome to
Indeed,
today's
and
show.
what a good evening it is. It's that a pleasant summer's day rather than the 30 degrees basting in your own juices. And frankly, when we broadcast, fans in the background, apart from those listening, tend to cause a problem. So we are here looking at Tuesday's big gig, which was the last full council of the summer.
Yes, it was indeed. And just before we get carried away by getting knee deep into that agenda, please do remember to give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, wherever you're catching us. Joining the conversation on Facebook or on YouTube. We'd love to hear what you've got to say about the items that are on Portsmouth City Council's agenda. But yes, the last full council meeting of the well, before summer. So of the summer, are we still calling this summer? It's still summer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's just past the midpoint, I think.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
the yeah.
So we're still at the sweltering point, but the kind of the
Well,
hopefully
but
the
it's got that sort of end of term feel about it, hasn't it? It's the we obviously bade farewell on Wednesday to Sir Keir in the final cuddly warm PMQ. So that episode's out there if you want to go back and catch that and feel the love in the air tonight. Obviously Thursday night they counted all the votes and found that the King of the North was there to be crowned, and he was crowned on Friday.
well they
And
didn't
then this
they didn't need to count the votes. There was enough. There was so many nominations for him that it was impossible for anyone else to get the 81
yeah, yeah.
MPs nominations from 81 MPs that would have allowed them to stand. So there was no
Yeah,
need for a vote.
it was all fairly straightforward.
Hmm.
So Andy B evidently will be unveiling his new cabinet on Monday.
Yep.
Lots of speculation out there, and
This regeneration.
this was meant to be our last show of the summer, but we got a special bonus show next Sunday, which we'll come on to as we get into
Yes.
the bones of the podcast.
Spoilers. Spoilers.
Exactly.
So yes, we are very lucky to squeeze an extra episode in. And we're delighted, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So keep them peeled. So quickly going kind of through the agenda to the notices of motion. Unfortunately, one of the councillors that gave their apologies for their absence on Tuesday was Charlotte Gerada, the leader of the Labour group. So that means that two of the motions that were actually in the agenda, because she's not there to propose them, means that they fall. So they weren't able to be put forward. So it is a trimmed down agenda. But the first thing on the agenda was talking about the town and country planning, and that is a motion from Hugh Mason and Suzy Horton from the Lib Dems, and this refers to the changes in legislation that the government's put through that come into effect at the end of October, that mean that a lot fewer planning applications will actually be able to come before the planning committee at the council. So should we, rather
Let's
than
have a
me
listen.
explain it, should we go straight into the listen? Do let us know what you're thinking as we go along.
The vast majority of applications, probably over 90% of them, will be required to be determined by planning officers. These will include all householder applications and all except the largest commercial and residential applications. Although the more major applications in Schedule 2 may, quote, with the agreement of the nominated planning officer, be delegated to a planning committee, the default position, or as it is called, the overriding assumption, will be that these decisions will also be made by planning officers. In effect, therefore, de facto, the officers become the local planning authority. I have heard two reasons put forward to support this change. The first is that it will provide uniformity of practice across all local authorities. Given the wide diversity of environments and local situations across this country, I remain to be convinced that this is desirable. But even if it is, it surely need not require the overturning of long-established principles and procedures. The second reason given is that local councillors lack sufficient training and knowledge of planning law and practice. From my own experience of this council, I consider that members of council committees are well able to come to balanced judgments when the facts and the legal constraints are set out before them. Most worrying of all in these changes is the fact that elected councillors will henceforth not be able to request that Schedule 1, that is over 90%, Schedule 1 applications be brought before a committee to be determined in a public forum, despite the fact that they may have attracted extensive public interest and concern. All Schedule 1 applications must, and this is the wording, must be determined by the officers. This will inevitably reduce public confidence in the planning process and also in the effectiveness of local councillors. My Lord Mayor, I am not naive enough to believe it likely that we can prevent or reverse these changes. But these changes are of such constitutional significance and practical importance that we should make a clear and unequivocal statement of this council's position. Please support the motion.
Now,
Just thought I'd quickly pause there. So that was pretty much Hugh Mason introducing the motion and those concerns. And essentially for those kind of who aren't kind of across the detail, and we're not on the planning changes. So he's saying there that there's a greater degree of planning applications are going to basically just be decided by planning officials at the council instead of being able to be either go to the planning committee, or for the local councillors, they can call in a planning application to then be discussed. Thoughts so far?
And something that we know that locally, people get a lot of, get very passionate about, and it'd be interesting to see this in more detail because, I'd like to put a bedroom in my loft, tends not to go before the planning committee, but I want to entirely gut my 3-bedroom house and turn it into an 8-bedroom house of multiple occupation, does tend to go in front of the planning committee, and it tends to attract quite a lot of local interest, oblique concern. So yeah, if those things are going to be, and I use the word rubber stamped, which sounds a bit pejorative, but if those decisions are going to be made by council officials with no public scrutiny, it's going to be interesting where this takes us.
Yeah, I guess just to play devil's advocate, I guess the flip side of that would be if you were a developer, if you meet the standard, your application is going to be approved.
Oh yeah, and that is the flip side, isn't it? It is that piece where, again, under the misunderstanding of the power of the local councillor, you need to object to this. Well, I do object to it. I don't like it. But unless it actually breaches planning law, then, realistically, you may not like it, but you haven't actually got any legal grounds for objection.
No.
And often you see this at impasse where the planning officers come in and say, well, you've called this one in. There's no legal basis to refuse it. So we'd invite you to approve it, because if you don't, the developer will just bump it up the chain. It will get approved, and we'll have to pay their costs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's a bit there. So coming next, we've got Joe Standen.
Genuinely believe that this legislation is taking away the right of the people to have a say. As Councillor Bosher said, what we've got to remember is we are elected into this chamber to be the voice of the public, and this legislation is taking it away. And that is why I believe, and as Councillor Mason put so well in the paper, this is a complete and utter affront to democracy. And that is why I'll be supporting this motion and the amendment 100% today, and I hope everyone else does too.
Thank you, Mr. Now I have Russell Simpson, Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've been waiting
in the wrong seat, it seems. I welcome this motion and the amendment and the continuation. July, near enough exactly a year last year, I brought forward with Councillor Madrick a lawful development certificate and amendment from Councillor Mason. Did we get a reply from Secretary of State? No. Then we followed up again. Councillor Spencer brought a motion forward, which I seconded. Did the Secretary of State write back to us? No. Did the Labour group support that motion? No. So we're back here. We're essentially ignored, not assured, but ignored by the government and not even supported by our local Labour councillors, which I think is really disappointing, to say the least. This takes away not only our voice, which we've been elected to do, but it also takes away the residents' voices, which they come in here and read deputations against an array of things. And actually, it goes against the Article 4 direction as well, around conservation areas elements as well as HMOs. I was going to mention it. But I think the point is that where I was really surprised is I saw a landlord and a developer in Hillsey, because they're always there, and I said to them, I bet you're really happy about this. And they said, actually, we're not, because we're going to get rogue landlords, rogue developers, who essentially will now have their planning application approved, and they will be painted with the same brush. So I was actually quite surprised by that, but that's how they feel about it. I think they know there are some bad applications. So I hope everyone supports this, and I really hope the Labour group support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So now have Councillor Heaney.
Thank you for that reception. Councillor is quite right. We have a local plan. We have a very extensive process of consultation on how the local plan should be developed and how it should be implemented. We've been through months and months of that, and we're just about to start the process again. Development of plan policy is really key, because that gives us the ammunition to both agree with and also to disagree with planning applications. If we have a strong policy, we can deal with applications that we don't think are suitable. I am told that we have one of the strongest HMO policies of any local authority in the country, and I'm very grateful for Councillor Hunt's endorsement at that point. So we have a really good, strong ability to deal with that issue, which affects residents. The other thing I think we remember, and I shall include my little history lesson for Councillor Bosher's point, back in the 1980s, the Conservative government made it a presumption that development should be allowed. The planning system was to allow development. The presumption was you would allow development, and that was a change in philosophy from previous governments. So the presumption is we must allow development unless there are very good reasons to refuse it. Now, when I talk to residents about planning applications, very often they'll come up with a whole series of reasons, but I always insist that the reasons they are going to be most effective are the ones that are based on planning principles and planning grounds. There are often lots of other reasons why they don't like a development, but I'm saying if you put that argument, it's not going to work. It won't affect the planning process or the planning system, because it's not the right sort of argument. So we have to be honest with our residents and tell them what we think is going to be most effective when we're being their advocates. In terms of what this proposal from government does, there is a certain amount of over-exaggeration. I don't see anything in this proposal that removes notifications to residents about planning applications. There is nothing in that, and for Councillor Bosher to suggest that residents won't be notified, I think is wrong. That isn't the case.
Planning is not an exact science, and whilst evidence is relevant and policies provide structure within that framework, there's frequently an element of judgment that is relevant on a case-by-case basis. I like to refer to it as bringing the human into the planning process. It's not a huge space to debate in, but it is a really meaningful one. The most frustrating aspect of the process for us on the planning committee is frequently that we're all trying to prove a negative before it's actually happened. For example, said development will have an impact on amenity or will disrupt and damage a street scene. And that is the purpose of the committee, in my opinion. But councillors on the planning committee do bring a high level of local knowledge and scrutiny, and it makes a genuine and meaningful impact on the quality of the debate and decision making. That's why individual councillors request that applications go to committee rather than happens with the majority are decided by delegation by the officers, which is going to be significantly reduced. But so what do councillors bring whilst working within that legislative framework? We are trained as councillors to represent residents in the city. And whilst when we're on the committee we're working to a different framework, we primarily try and do what we always do, which is to see things from the perspective of the resident, whether that's the applicant or whether that's the objector. That public scrutiny and open decision-making is so important in a democracy, even if the outcome upsets some and is misunderstood by others.
My question to them would be, is planning really the major problem that is holding up house building delivery in this country? I don't think it is. The problem is one of government house building policy. And for a start, I think there's been an over-reliance on the private sector building houses in this country. And look what they've delivered. Nowhere near what's needed, and specifically the wrong type of housing that's needed, in the wrong places, the wrong sizes, not family houses where people need it, tiny little rabbit hutches that they can maximise the profit out of, most likely in commuter towns from London where realistically people don't want to live. Also, building on that, there's many sites, many big sites across this country where planning permission exists and has existed for years, but they're not being built out. So if the problem was really one of planning, then why aren't those sites being built out? And the reason for that, again, comes back to profit and the role of the private sector in dominating the house building industry in this country. The big house builders, on a commercial scale, land bank sites and they buy up the planning permissions. They stop anyone else from building there because they haven't got the rights to do so, but they won't build it out themselves until it's profitable to do so, which might be in 5 years, it might be in 10 years, it might be in 20 years further down the line. It might never get built out, but at least they've had that right to make the profit and stop anyone else using that land in a socially beneficial way. And I think there's a local example we can look to where this is a good contrast to what's happening right now. If you look at what's happening on the Vivid site in Tipner, those properties are being built out pretty quick. And I think this every time I go past. There's a new story in that building. There's a new story in that building. Am I just imagining this? So I went and looked at what the research says. And in 2025, there was a government report on house building which found out that housing associations and other non-for-profit housing delivery providers build out their sites twice as quickly as the for-profit providers, which to some people might not make sense, because surely you'd think these house builders want to build homes as quickly as possible to maximise their profits. But what they don't want to do is flood the market. If they've got a massive site and they deliver 1,000 homes in a year, that's going to depress the prices. It's much more profitably, that seems counter to logic, but it's much more profitable for them to build 100 homes over 10 years.
So just to cover through who we counselled, so that was Russell Simpson of Reform, who often speaks quite passionately about HMOs, Graham Heaney, the deputy leader of the Labour group, Suzy Horton, who is the chair of the planning committee, and Councillor Cal Corkery, who's the independent councillor in Charles Dickens. So a variety of things kind of said there. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's one of those things where this is obviously it's a complex area, isn't it? Because there is that piece around representation. There's a piece around, planning is something that gets people very vexed. Cal at the end there spoke very eloquently, almost giving a kind of overview of, his position on house building and, how almost the market is being engineered to not provide social housing, which I'm not sure is linked to the motion itself, but, I know housing is something Cal feels very passionately about. I think that the challenge with this one, more than anything else, Simon, is it's, I'm kind of a bit torn after that to try and work out, is this just a tidying up of admin that stops NIMBYism holding up much needed development, or is it taking development away from public scrutiny to be, and I'll use it again, rubber stamped in darkened rooms so that transparency is lost? I'm not sure.
Well, me either. I think I can see there's cases on kind of either side. It seems strange to withdraw that democratic and public and visible oversight, but at the same time, is that really what's kind of holding up the issue with kind of planning? Is that the kind of the thing? Just to clarify, the motion was essentially calling for the leader of the council to write to the minister concerned, expressing the council's concern of the changes on democratic local government, which I'm sure isn't something they're not aware of. as a concern. We can't be the first council to be expressing that, and to ask the city's two MPs to bring this to the attention of Parliament, and to hope that they will seek to prevent the implementation of these retrograde proposals. Which I don't know. I'm not going to put a lot of money on them.
Seems very unlikely, doesn't it?
Giving the new brush is all about devolution and stuff. I don't know how that's going to work, but I think there's a lot of detail on this one we really kind of need to get into to understand what's at risk, how it works now, and what actually the kind of the pitfalls are. Were you going to reveal? I was trying to lead you up there.
Oh, this is indeed teeing it up, which is why next Sunday we are joined by Councillor Suzy Horton, who is the chair of the Planning Committee, where we can dive into this in more detail. So, it is something that gets people vexed. So we will be pumping out on social media the opportunity. If you've got questions you want asked on this and you want themes that you want us to pull on, provided of course the questions are respectful and kind, as is our way, then yes, we would be more than happy to hear from you, and we will put those questions to Suzy along with our own confused, furrowed brow moments where we're kind of not sure which way this really is taking us.
Yeah, so I think a good deal of kind of myth busting and understanding the state of planning, as it were, is a good one. Will it surprise you? Do you want to have a guess as to what the result was?
I reckon that Labour abstained and everybody else voted for.
So with this one, there wasn't a recorded vote, but there were 35 votes for, 0 against, and 3 abstentions. But I think you can put money on the 3 abstentions being
members of the Labour
members
group.
Which is, if someone was there or saw it, then please correct us in the comments. So should we move to?
Yeah, just noting there, we were three short, weren't we? Because the mayor doesn't vote unless it's a draw. So only 38 votes cast, which means, and we know Charlotte wasn't there, so there was another 2 missing.
Yeah, well, there were a few people missing from across the chamber, but we can kind of get to those in a minute. So
cool. What we got next?
Military families and the high income child benefit charge. This is another motion brought by the Lib Dems, so proposed by Leonie Oliver and seconded by Council Leader Steve Pitt. Should we go straight to the video, because I think she explains it better than I'm going to?
I rise today to present this motion on behalf of the many military families in Portsmouth who are being unfairly impacted by the high income child benefit charge. This is not simply a matter of tax policy, it is a matter of fairness. It is about recognising the realities of military family life and ensuring that those who support our armed forces are not financially disadvantaged because of that service. Like many families in our city, my own family serves this country through the Royal Navy. Last year, my husband was deployed for 9 months out of the 12. During that time, I was effectively a single parent, managing childcare, school runs, illnesses, holidays, parents' evenings, hobbies, dance club, gymnastics, and every other responsibility that comes with raising a family while a loved one is serving overseas. Like thousands of military spouses across the country, I had to put my own career second. My ability to work full-time is restricted by the realities of service life, where deployments, unpredictable schedules, and frequent absences make securing and maintaining flexible employment incredibly difficult. This is not a choice, it is a consequence of supporting someone who serves our country.
I just want to push more to the fact of, yes, it is the parents that receive this. However, this money is for the service children, and service children should not be punished for their mother or father going to war and risking their life and potentially making the ultimate sacrifice and never coming home, just because they are rewarded for putting their life on the line for this country so we can sleep safe at night.
A high-income child benefit charge was never designed with the realities of military life in mind. Temporary deployment pay or retention bonuses should not leave the families worse off simply because one parent has answered the call to serve while the other has had to sacrifice career opportunities to keep family life together at home.
So pretty clear one, though. I mean, there were other speakers on that one. Again, Joe Standen, as anybody who follows anything in Portsmouth will be aware. Obviously, Joe, an ex-service serving member of the armed forces himself, so very, very keen to contribute on that one. This seems such a wrong thing. Why was this kind of? This is a law of unintended consequences, isn't it? Surely.
Well, this is a difficult one because if you look at it through if we frame what it effectively means is that you get child benefit up until a tipping point where if you earn too much, you don't get child benefit anymore. That was was what was brought in originally. And I think most people have I think most people were genuinely supportive of that. Where you, like with everything, where you set that threshold is always, it is always a controversial point because there's that piece where if you then earn over that threshold, well, your children aren't any freer, are they? You still have to pay for them, which means, you know, you would still, that money would be beneficial. But, if I then become hyperbolic, if you're earning £1 million a year, you probably don't need the, you know, 20, 30 quid, 30 quid a week, whatever child benefit is now. So that's the kind of framework we're against. And if I understand this issue correctly, when a service person is deployed, kind of overseas, or there is an element of and I'm going to use the word bonus pay that they get awarded for
Deployment
being
pay,
on
I
the
think it's
it's deployment pay for being overseas. Now, obviously, that then takes them over the income threshold, or can take them over the income threshold, which means they then lose the child benefit. So I think what's actually being asked for here is for the law to change to exempt service personnel from the risk of having to lose out like the rest of the population when their pay exceeds a certain threshold.
So what's being asked in the motion is basically to ask the leader of the council to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whoever that might be on Monday, to call upon the government to exempt or disregard deployment-related earnings, operational allowances, sea pay, retention bonuses when calculating eligibility for child benefit. Because, frankly, if members, it's not a. I get that if you were looking at the numbers, and again, just a hyperbolic extreme, a difference between a banker suddenly getting a pay rise or suddenly getting a massive bonus or suddenly getting a promotion is a different thing to a member of the armed forces who doesn't have a choice that they're staying deployed or doesn't have a choice that they're actually really in harm's way and therefore is getting extra allowances because of the nature of their deployment, that then actually causes problems at home because the parent that's left at home, who's been operating all that time as a single parent, is now then going to lose that child benefit. And the example that Leonie went on and explained was about actually having to pay back some that had been paid, and then kind of go through all of that again about it spinning up when that dropped below, because it's a temporary thing. So it's not asking members of the armed forces to be exempt from the cap. It's asking those elements of additional pay that are payments in recognition of extended deployment and dangerous deployments. Those should be exempt because of the government and the country's promise that members of its armed forces and their families shouldn't be disadvantaged from essentially putting their life on the line for the country. You're not buying it.
I'm not convinced. Because at the end of and this is the difficulty, isn't it? It's thresholds, because we can use our millionaire banker example, but the threshold kicks in at a sort of junior to middle management level. So your senior planning officer, if we take it back to the first, if somebody's a planning officer and they take the role of a senior planning officer, then their child benefit will be affected. So I
think a
I
promotion is
accept
a
it.
different thing to a.
Yeah, but the fact,
You're at sea for 9 months.
yeah, but to be fair, this is, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of passionate language used there, and
Yeah.
putting yourself in harm's way, ultimate sacrifice, all of those things. When you sign up to be a member of the Royal Navy, I think it might not come as a surprise to you that for chunks of your life you are required to be on a boat somewhere in the world doing Navy things. So I sort of get it, but for me, that income is still your income, and I'm a little bit skeptical as to, you know, why, at the end of the day, at the end of the year, you'll get a P45, or not P45, but a P60 that says you earned however many thousand, and yeah, for a great chunk of that to be disregarded. Yeah, I'm not swayed either way, but I'm not sure that I'm as convinced as Leonie and Joe sounded.
Okay. Well, the result was unanimous. So the council were completely behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and they would be, because who except a slightly strange podcast commentator would be doing the no, take the money away from our service personnel abroad. I kind of get it. So, and as I say, I'm not massively wedded to taking the money away. So unanimous. Another letter to somebody senior in government who we don't even know who they are on Monday, so we're going to have to wait before they address the envelope.
Yeah.
And
so usual sort of things of calling on the leader of the council to write to members of the relevant members of the government, but also calling on the city's 2 MPs to seek their support for reform of the policy.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think those are, this is a cause that the 2 city MPs, I think, would be much more likely to get behind than perhaps the argue with your own government about their own planning reforms. So, yeah, let's see what comes next.
Okay, so next, 13C is preserving Portsmouth historic title and place in local government. This is about so local government reorganisation, which is not the same as devolution, but is being run kind of alongside it to essentially reorganise the local councils within the region, so that they're essentially, instead of some of them having 2 tiers, or there being 2 unitary authorities like Southampton and Portsmouth, that are essentially there are the Hampshire and the Solent region, as it's being called, is split into 5 different councils. The Isle of Wight, one for the southeast of Hampshire, one for the west, one for all of those sort of stuff. So the one that we would be in, which essentially encompasses Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Waterlooville, and Havant, and a little bit of Rowlands Castle, I think. That's currently being called Southeast Hampshire, and there seems to be a bit of a scrap about that, because essentially it doesn't have the word Portsmouth in it.
So before we dive into the video, do we know what the others are called, and does one of them have Southampton in it?
I think there are conversations about what those others are called, but I don't know what the others are called. But the one on the Isle of Wight is the Isle of Wight because it's only the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
But I think
don't dismiss the Isle of Wight in such a cursory way.
Well, no, it doesn't. It only is the Isle of Wight, so it would be silly to call it something else. It would be crazy. But sorry, you are right. The others, I think they're kind of, so the one that's kind of centred around Winchester, that seems that's going to have the name Winchester in the name, and likewise the Southampton and the water or something. But essentially,
Waterside, yeah,
Waterside. So essentially, that's their problem. But essentially, the motion is so this one from Spencer Gardiner, seconded by Simon Bosher from the Conservatives, essentially calling on the council to agree with actually what the cabinet have already resolved, which is that the name Portsmouth needs to be retained in the name of that region, and the cabinet suggestion was that it would be that the region be called Portsmouth and South East Hampshire. But have a listen to how this debate goes, because, well, you'll see.
Yeah.
Whatever our views on local government reorganisation, I hope we can agree on one thing. If Portsmouth is part of the new authority, Portsmouth must be in its name. The government's working title of South East Hampshire Council serves to erase this city from the map. I appreciate that some of the strongest opposition to retaining the Portsmouth name comes from Conservative colleagues in neighbouring areas, their own local identities. This goes to highlight the fundamental flaw in LGR. We are trying to force together disparate places into a mega council that cannot even agree on a common identity or name. That being said, Portsmouth is the economic, cultural and historic anchor of the region. Our city is internationally recognised for its maritime heritage, naval significance and visitor economy. That brand benefits not just Portsmouth, but the wider area. Retaining the Portsmouth name is therefore not a matter of civic pride alone, it is the strongest economic proposition for the whole authority area. The new authority must include Portsmouth in its title. Portsmouth's name has been recognised around the world for centuries. We should not be the council that allows it to disappear from the name of the authority that governs.
I've got to talk about this politically now, and I will. I have no idea why Labour is not listening, and I'm sure the Labour councillors here too agree with me, but they can't say so. I'm pretty certain of it. They saw colleagues recently lose their ward council seats in the north of the city and in the south of the city, and it will be repeated again in May 2027. I can guarantee there's no way back for Labour around here because they have let Portsmouth down.
This is about protecting Portsmouth's future, and I know that when it comes to the Conservative Party, we have got some awkward sods across the water and further up the A3, but at least that is democracy. That is, as Councillor Pitt said, they're actually standing up for their local areas. Well, I'm standing up for mine. I'm standing up for the city that I was actually born in. And what I'm not going to accept is the Labour Party seeking to erase Portsmouth from the map. I'd really like to hear from Councillor Heaney as to what his views actually are on this. Should Portsmouth be a part of the new name? But after all, we're going down this route of LGR, something that nobody here, well, I say nobody, this side of the chamber doesn't want. Not many people in Hampshire actually want. It's something that is being foisted on us, and we're ending up with notice of motion like this on our order paper trying to protect the name Portsmouth. Quite frankly, I think it's scandalous, Lord Mayor.
When the government then published what their outcome was, option 1A, they put us down as a signatory and say we supported it. When we pointed that out to them, they didn't. Their response was tough. We're not changing it. Who are these people? Faceless bureaucrats sat in Westminster deciding the future of our lives, our residents' lives, and their children and their grandchildren's lives. This is important, and we're not getting importance or any sense of acknowledgement from this damn government about just how much this matters. It matters because we're going to lose most of our services that people care about. It matters because they want to just rub out our name and call us some random thing because it's easier for them. Not to us, it's not. This is our lives, this is our home. This city must always be called Portsmouth. It will not, under any circumstances, ever be called bloody South West Hampshire.
As I said earlier, the briefing we had a few weeks ago, there was unanimity among the members, although not every single member was attending the briefing about keeping Portsmouth as the name of any new local authority. So there isn't, I think, any dissent in this room, in this chamber, about the importance of that. I believe from the consultations that have taken place, the majority of local authorities involved in this want to see Portsmouth as part of the name. I understand no final decision has been made. I don't know exactly when the decision is going to be made, but the sooner the better, I think, on that basis. And if the majority of local authorities connected with the new council want to see Portsmouth, I don't see why we shouldn't have Portsmouth as the name.
Yes, just point of information, Lord Mayor. That we've been told that if we are in agreement, we can suggest a different name. We are not in agreement because Fareham do not concur. So the current information we have from government is that unless we can all agree that together, they'll make us stick with what we've got.
Well, that wasn't clear, but that's now clear. Well, I think that just makes the point that we should be lobbying very hard for the inclusion of Portsmouth in the name. It does seem a bit silly to be having this argument, quite frankly, given that the majority of the local authority areas here are. And why does it have to be complete consistency? There will always be people who disagree.
I'm grateful to the contribution of colleagues, selected residents of Uganda, Councillor Whittington's Real Our Group, and even Councillor Heaney all support the ethos of this motion. The only people that seemingly don't are our local Portsmouth MPs. Generations before us built the reputation and standing of this city. Let's hope this Labour government doesn't tear that up.
Wow, that got a bit spicy, didn't it?
So I'll just quickly run through some points there. So the motion introduced by Spencer Gardiner, then Lee Hunt from the Lib Dems, Simon Bosher from the Conservatives, Steve Pitt, obviously leader of the council, quite impassioned. I think he misspoke slightly. Southeast Hampshire is what it is. It was being talked about. Graham Heaney again from the Labour group, and then the summary at the end from Spencer Gardiner. But centering on Portsmouth as the economic, cultural, and historic anchor. But Labour seeking to erase Portsmouth from the map.
Interesting, isn't it? Because at the end of the day. Portsmouth it's where the majority of the people live. It's where it is the known identity, or it's the major known identity in the grouping. And it seems absurd to me that you wouldn't include Portsmouth in the name. I mean, I would have gone further. It was a presumption to me that it would just simply become Greater Portsmouth, in the same way that
Greater
Manchester became. If you look at having spent some time up there with work, yes, you've got Manchester, but you've got Wigan and Oldham and Lee, and all kind of towns with very proud histories, cultural identities, a lot that kind of makes them adjacent but not part of. And there's a bit of me that's like, well, this all feels a bit. It all feels a bit silly. But there's also an element of, I guess, the bigger picture, isn't it? Is that there's Fareham, Gosport, Havant, and Waterlooville. Those. It seems odd to me that one of those can effectively veto.
Yes. So what Steve Pitt said there was that apparently the government have said, well, unless all of you agree on the name change, and apparently Fareham don't agree on changing it to Portsmouth and Southeast Hampshire, then basically you can't. But as Spencer Gardiner said, well, that kind of demonstrates the problem, doesn't it? You've got all of these different entities, and if we can't even, you're forcing them, to work together and to become one unitary authority, but they can't even agree what to fucking call themselves.
Well, and that's where that problem lies, isn't it? Is that if you look at it, and it is a thing about identity, and I get it.
Mm.
Only a couple of weeks ago, might even only been last week. We were talking with residents and councillors from Hayling Island.
Yes.
Well, Hayling Island is part of Havant Borough Council,
Mm.
as is Emsworth.
Yeah.
As is Lee
Someone did
Park.
actually remark, you try telling someone on Hayling Island that they live in Havant, and they'll bite you.
Exactly that. So it is a kind of, it is about an identity, and it's about, well, one
What's
of
in the
the
name?
things well, it's one of the things that's often been said about Portsmouth. Whilst Portsmouth has a strong collective identity, there's often been a thought that there is a little bit of kind of village mentality, around some areas of Portsmouth, which have very strong kind of cultural identities. If you go into Baffins has a very strong
Yes.
identity.
Yeah.
There are people who believe that Cosham and Drayton aren't really part of Portsmouth
Don't
because
start.
we've crossed
Don't
the
start.
divide.
You
But
yeah, I get what you mean. You get the same in Milton or in
yeah,
Stampshire and in
oh well,
Buckland
yeah,
probably. So
Milton.
it's
You know, Milton is a law unto itself, isn't it? So you kind of get a bit of that, but I guess there is an interesting piece, isn't there, with this whole. For me, there's something very interesting going on at the moment about this whole thing around devolution, greater power, and representation.
yes.
And if we draw that line through it, we look at that conversation we had around Hailing, and the fact that they had 6 councillors, and going forward it looks like they'll have fewer, so that means that perhaps a parish council is the way forward. Portsmouth has 42, which is obviously the answer to the universe, and when they all come together, that number will almost certainly change. So this kind of, and as Steve said whilst banging the desk passionately, faceless bureaucrats in Westminster. I mean, he sounded a touch reform at
We're
that
going to
point,
take
didn't
back
he?
control. So just hold that thought for a second, because I've got some really good contributions from follower of the pod, Tim Owens. So there's some. Forgive me, Tim. I'm going to have to abridge them because they're very detailed and some quite lengthy ones. But he talks about the oldest settlement in the area is actually Porchester, which is located in the borough of Fareham.
Yep.
Haven't listed in 1086 Doomsday Book. So there's lots of kind of other stuff there. And he also mentions that although he agrees that Portsmouth should be a name, actually it's only 40% of the area's population. So it might be the largest single contributor to the population, but actually the rest of the area is 60%. So in that respect, so the thought that I just had, and again, someone might just kind of point out that that's kind of like that's a crazy idea, is not being funny. Whatever the government say, once the damn thing's constituted, can't it vote to change its name if it wants? If it then agrees, and you just get a simple majority to do that. I don't know. And the other point to clarify is, of course, the city of Portsmouth will still exist. No one's changing the name of the city. It's just it will be part of a unitary authority that, under the current proposals, doesn't have the name Portsmouth in it. So do you end up with something like, I mean, you kind of down the coast to the west, you've got Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole, you've got BCP. I'm assuming they couldn't agree on something either, so they just put them all in. And so do we become PFGH? I don't. Doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? But
it doesn't. And to be fair, those bastards in Fareham, they can go last. So whichever way it rolls, if they're the people that are holding this up, then they are the. I'm not one to judge, but they are morally reprehensible. at this point. So
well, that's us buggered for getting anyone from Fareham to come on the show again. Thanks,
yeah.
Ian.
Well, no. To be fair, they've never really shown up, have they? So no friends of
We've had people on from Fareham.
Well, that's before they turned on us. No, I think, I mean, ultimately, and I'm, people.
Yeah, I know you're being playful, but
not really. No,
not entirely, but
not entirely. But I just think that, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got, Portsmouth is looking to push forward. It is, I mean, I guess part of that passion and frustration, and particularly for Steve, because whatever you might think politically, Hampshire has got a massive budget deficit.
Yes.
Southampton has got a massive budget deficit. The Isle of Wight has a massive budget deficit. Portsmouth does not have a massive budget deficit. And everyone can go on about, well, the cruel government, 14 years, can only do that for a couple more weeks probably, of Tory cuts. Well, Portsmouth has managed its way through that. Portsmouth has done the right thing. If nothing else other than to reward Portsmouth for doing that bit well, you should get headline billing on whatever the bloody thing's called.
To me, it makes perfect sense. I can appreciate that some of our listeners in the environs of Havant, Waterlooville, Hayling, Gosport and Fareham might not feel entirely the same. So it's almost like this arm folding exercise. Well, if we can't have our name in it, you bloody can't either. I don't know. But the other thing that's the other thing that's been interesting is this has kind of descended into a bit of a Facebook point scoring exercise because Portsmouth North MP Amanda Martin has then taken to social media to criticise Steve Pitt, saying that he signed up for the name, and he's pointed out that he didn't, and that's not what he did, and he didn't sign up for the name. He just said, if you're not going to do our preferred option, which is to leave us the bloody hell alone, and you're forcing us, we'll go with the grouping option, which was 1A.
Yes.
But he and what Steve Pitt has said is that he's never put his name to saying that he agreed with that title for the area.
Yes.
We don't have the receipts, we can't go through that, but it's interesting that there's that kind of level of disagreement. But if on one hand you've got someone trying to defend the government and say, well, this is what you agreed to, well then surely, as was said in the clip, get agreement on changing it then. Or change it once it's constituted. Vote to get it to change its name. I don't know whether constitutionally that's permissible. That's one to ask someone.
And there is a thing, and in my work life, I have just been putting together new regional groupings.
Okay.
And one of my regional groupings has been effectively the southeast of Hampshire, including Portsmouth. And so the question for people who aren't native say, well, okay, well, how do we know? And there was a very simple way for me to answer that question. PO postcodes.
Yes.
If you're in Gosport, you're in a PO postcode. If you're in Emsworth, you're in a PO postcode.
Yes, I mean, to be fair, so is the Isle of Wight, but...
Yeah, but there's an element of, as you dismissed it, so it's only the Isle of Wight, you can tell that that's not part of Portsmouth because there's a big bit of green
island.
wobbly stuff between us and them. But there's an element of, I didn't see those NIMBYs and kind of people of Fareham complaining about having a PO postcode. Well, we don't want a PO postcode. We want an effing postcode to represent our Fareham-based identity. No, you're part of Greater Portsmouth. Get over it, sweethearts.
So we've got some, and thank you, Tim, for those fantastic contributions. We've got a couple more contributions that I did want to include. So so Grania, who's a Green councillor in Emsworth, if memory serves, and apologies if I've got that wrong.
Yeah, no, that's spot on.
Has said, She gets the argument to include Portsmouth in the name Portsmouth, a name that is known throughout the world from Havant, hopefully for good reasons, hopefully. But thank you. And then again, but then so is Chichester. I mean, Chichester are over the. I think you mean about has a PO postcode. Sorry. So yeah, obviously
yes, it does. But
Chichester is way out the postcode. We got another one from for Tim, kind of coming up on the debts and deficits. So the difference, just for so the deficit is the difference between how much you've got coming in and how much you're spending each year,
yes.
and the debt is actually how much money you owe. So
Yeah,
whether
no,
you're spending more than you earn each month.
Yeah, that's why I specifically use the word deficit.
But he points out that Portsmouth has actual debts of 680 million, whereas Havant has debts of 3 million. But I don't know whether that's because of their different tiered authorities.
Well, of course,
Havant didn't have the same ability to get into debt because it didn't have the same responsibilities that because Hampshire was basically dealing, and forgive me, was dealing with all the complicated stuff. So but he quite rightly points out, so if that 680 million debt goes belly up, then then that will be a problem. So
yeah, but that's like saying that the house that you live in is that's a debt. Well, yeah, if you look at debt, a lot of that is about money that's been invested. So, no, I think, appreciate the contributions, Tim. There is an element, and thank you, Gronya. Lovely to have you on board as part of the Greater Portsmouth area. And let's look at it. If a podcast and myself on the right of politics in Portsmouth and the Green Councillor from Emsworth can agree, then everybody else should agree as well. I think nice and clear.
Well, okay, that definitely makes sense. But do please remember to keep the comments flowing. Do give us a like, a thumbs up, a follow, subscribe, etc. Wherever you're getting us. Give us a review if you're listening. But there we go. So,
good Lord.
What?
It's just struck me.
What, the time?
No.
Okay. What?
I don't want to become the Southeast Hampshire podcast.
Well,
politics
that's why
podcast.
we want the name changed, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to be
the
Southeast Hampshire politics podcast.
It doesn't roll. It doesn't flow.
Yeah, I mean, even if you took, I mean, it's just too. Even if it was PFBH or even HH, if you have Hailing and Havant, then it needs a couple of vowels in there somewhere along the line. It's kind of like three from the top, two from the bottom. So it's not quite working. So will it surprise you to learn that was a unanimous agreement? However, Darren Sanders called for, bearing in mind that everyone agrees so well, can we have a recorded vote?
Oh, so we recorded everybody who said yes.
So we've recorded everybody that said yes, and of course the people that didn't. And that even included the Lord Mayor. You were saying earlier on, it's not. They don't always actually contribute. It's quite common for them not to, unless they need to for the casting vote. But the Lord Mayor has. That's Kadir who's voted there. So yes, so that one again. So lots of unanimity in this week's council chamber. 13D, just very quickly. 13D. Wasn't moved because unfortunately Councillor Charlotte Gerada wasn't able to make it to the chamber, and E was supporting Portsmouth UK City of Culture bid for 2029, which of course everybody got behind, but that was also a recorded unanimous vote, and then 13F, which was celebrating Portsmouth's centenary and diversity, that was also a motion that wasn't moved because it was one of Charlotte's. So that was actually done in 2.5 hours.
I'm a little bit suspicious about those recorded votes, Simon. I think they are.
You think they're teeing up for leaflets?
I think they're insurance. I think they're insurance that further down the line, nobody then pipes up and says, "Oh, this City of Culture, it's costing too." Well, I don't think we should have done it. I think there's a little bit of insurance there. So, well, it looks like as they head off into the summer, mostly unanimous.
Yes.
No, and yeah, we shall be wearing our Keep Portsmouth something
Take back
t-shirts when
control.
we get exactly that. So, and you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Portsmouth Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Do join us next week at 6:27 next Sunday, where we're looking at planning, fact versus fiction. So we're looking at the state of planning and explaining it and what those changes are. We'll be delighted to be joined by Councillor Suzy Horton. So thank you very much, Tim and Grania, for those fantastic comments. But we shall see you. We shall see you then. Join us next time, 6:27.
Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.